Stop struggling. Alan Watts explains how the universe really works. You've probably spent years of your life trying to be someone, to fix yourself, to succeed, to find your purpose, need to figure life out like it's some impossible riddle you're expected to solve. And here's the catch: no one told you the rules, yet they told you to play. You've felt that constant inner tension, right? That quiet, gnawing sense that if you don't keep pushing, grinding, performing, you'll fall behind or fall apart. But what if the entire game is based on a false premise? What if struggling is not how the universe works, but the one thing that actually stops you from experiencing it as it really is? Alan Watts was the philosopher who dared to say it out loud. Your attempt to control your life is exactly what's making you feel out of control. The more you chase happiness, the more it slips through your fingers. The more you try to be spiritual, the more you build a false ego around being egoless. The harder you struggle to relax, the more tense you become. It's like trying to smooth water with your hand. The harder you press, the more you disturb it. But Watts wasn't preaching passivity or escapism. He was pointing to something deeper, something most of us completely miss. You are not a separate observer of the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself for a little while. You're not a lonely subject, trying to conquer an objective world. You are what's happening right now.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
And once you begin to feel that, not just intellectually understand it, but feel it in your bones, everything changes. The struggle loses its grip. The inner war that's been running your life slowly collapses. You don't need to reach some final goal. You don't need to improve your soul. You don't need to become enlightened. Why? Because you already are what you're trying to become. You just don't believe it. You've been hypnotized by language, by stories, by social conditioning into thinking life is a mountain to climb, not a dance to enjoy. And here's the wildest part: even your struggle to stop struggling is just another part of the dance. Let's go even deeper. Watts liked to remind us that the ego, the I that thinks it's separate from everything else, is a social fiction. It doesn't exist in the way we believe it does. It's a symbol, a role, a character we're playing. Imagine a wave in the ocean thinking it's separate from the sea. That's us. We create this ego as a survival tool, and then we forget it's just a tool. We believe it's who we are. So when we suffer, it's not because we're fundamentally broken, it's because we've mistaken the mask for the face. So, if you're not the ego, who are you? Watts would say you're the totality of all that is. You are the process, not the product. You are not a fixed thing. You are a happening, a flowing, a becoming. You are the rhythm of life expressing itself in a form for a time. And when you stop trying to force life into your agenda and instead align with the flow, things begin to harmonize. Not in some magical, fluffy way, but in a deeply grounded, astonishingly real way. Life becomes lighter, freer. You stop trying to be confident and simply notice the silence beneath the chatter. You stop obsessing over your identity and begin to participate fully in this unfolding moment, right here, without needing it to be anything else. But then a question bubbles up: if we stop struggling, won't we just become lazy, unmotivated, lost? That's the great fear, isn't it? That if we let go, we'll fall. But have you ever actually tested that? Have you truly let go of the demand to control everything? Watts says letting go isn't passivity, it's trust. Not blind trust in a story or belief, but in life itself, in the same intelligence that grows your hair, beats your heart, and turns embryos into poets. You don't tell your heart to beat. You don't remind your lungs to breathe. So why do you believe your conscious mind needs to manage the rest of life? Here's the paradox. Only when you let go of the effort to hold it all together do you finally become whole. Because you realize there's nothing to hold. Nothing was ever separate to begin with. The universe isn't a machine, it's a symphony. And your role isn't to force it into tune, but to hear the music and dance with it. The myth of control. Why letting go doesn't mean giving up, but waking up. We've all been taught that if you want to succeed, if you want peace, fulfillment, happiness, you need to take control of your life. Set goals, stay disciplined, crush distractions, micromanage your thoughts, curate your personality, fix your flaws. But Alan Watts turns this entire mindset upside down. He suggests that what we call control is often just a sophisticated illusion, a mental trick we play on ourselves to feel safe in an unpredictable world. And the more we cling to that illusion, the more anxious and disconnected we become. The problem isn't that we want control, it's that we believe we already have it. You can't control your thoughts any more than you can control the weather. Have you ever tried to stop worrying by sheer force of will, or forced yourself to fall asleep? The very act of trying not to try becomes another form of trying, but it loops back on itself. The mind creates more tension by fighting itself. You become trapped in an internal battle, struggling against a current that was never meant to be resisted. But what if you don't need to resist? What if the thoughts, the fears, the noise aren't problems to solve but waves to surf? Watts says the first step isn't to eliminate your thoughts, but to observe them. Not as you, the thinker, watching your mind, but as pure awareness, watching the play of consciousness itself. The ego wants to pretend it's the captain steering the ship, but really it's a ripple on the ocean, trying to command the tide. When you recognize this, something incredible happens. You don't become powerless. You become peaceful, because you stop wasting energy on a fantasy of control and start aligning with the flow of life as it actually is. This is where the deeper meaning of letting go comes in. Letting go doesn't mean giving up your dreams, your ambitions, or your values. It doesn't mean sitting on the couch waiting for enlightenment to show up like a pizza delivery. Letting go means releasing your death grip on outcomes. It means doing what you do, working, creating, loving with full attention, while no longer needing the universe to obey your script. You participate, but you don't possess. You act, but you don't cling. You begin to trust the process, even when the outcome remains a mystery. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to force life, you often become far more effective. Have you ever noticed how athletes perform best when they're in a state of flow? Not when they're overthinking every move, but when they're relaxed, present, and completely immersed. The same is true for artists, musicians, even entrepreneurs. But their genius doesn't come from control, it comes from presence. Watts would say they're dancing with life, not wrestling it. So ask yourself, what are you trying to control right now? Your future? Your image? Your emotions? The way others see you? What if you paused, took a breath, and allowed yourself to stop fixing for a moment? Not forever, just long enough to see how much effort you're pouring into maintaining an illusion. What would happen if you loosened your grip? Watts often reminded us that the fear of letting go stems from a false belief that without our ego in control, everything would collapse. But look around. The planets aren't crashing into each other. The forests grow without human permission. Your body digests food and heals wounds without your conscious input. There is a deep intelligence running through life, one that predates your plans and survives your mistakes. Letting go is learning to trust that intelligence again, not because you're naive, but because you've seen what happens when you don't. Of course, we resist this because the ego craves security. It wants to know what's next. It wants guarantees. But here's the thing, the universe doesn't operate on guarantees. It flows, it transforms, it surprises, and the only way to live fully inside that flow is to stop resisting change, to stop demanding that life fit your mold, and instead begin adapting to its rhythm. When you do that, you stop surviving life and start surfing it. So letting go isn't about passivity, it's about intimacy. A deep, fearless intimacy with the moment. It means no longer standing outside of life trying to manipulate it, but stepping into the dance fully. With all your fears, all your questions, all your wild wonder. This shift is more than psychological. It's existential. You begin to see that life doesn't happen to you, it happens through you. You're not a puppet of fate, nor the puppet master. You're the dance itself, the rhythm, the pulse, the presence. The more you release the myth of control, the more freedom you discover, not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the deeper freedom of wanting less, needing less, but to, and being more. So the question is not, how do I control my life? But rather, what part of me is so afraid of letting go? Can you sit with that fear, not push it away, not analyze it into oblivion, but breathe with it, hold it lightly, and allow it to pass through like a cloud across the sky? Fear disguised as discipline, why chasing self-improvement keeps you trapped in illusion. There's a story we've been fed over and over. If we just become better, smarter, fitter, more mindful, more productive, then we'll finally be happy. We treat life like a giant self-improvement project, constantly upgrading ourselves as if we're broken machines. And the paradox is, the more we fix, the more flawed we feel. It never ends. Alan Watts wasn't against growth, but he saw clearly the trap of endless striving. When self-improvement becomes an obsession, it's no longer about growth, it's about fear in disguise. Think about it. When you chase self-improvement from a place of lack, you're reinforcing the very belief that you are not enough. Every book you read, every habit you track, every meditation you perform under the pressure of becoming better sends a quiet signal to your unconscious. You're still not there yet. You're still wrong as you are. The ego latches onto this and builds a fortress around it, an identity based on the idea that fulfillment lies somewhere out there in the future, just beyond the next self-help breakthrough. But that future never comes. Watts challenges us with a disturbing yet liberating thought. There is no separate you who can step outside yourself and fix yourself. There is no master controller sitting behind your eyes making calculated upgrades to the soul. That's just another fantasy of the ego. Instead, what we call you is the entire process of being just as a flame is not a thing but a continuous pattern of combustion. So when you try to improve yourself, who is doing the improving and who is being improved? It's like trying to bite your own teeth or lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. Now, this doesn't mean growth is meaningless. It means the way we approach growth has to change. Rather than striving from a sense of deficiency, we can grow through awareness, curiosity, and alignment. You don't meditate to fix yourself, you meditate to see more clearly. You don't work out to escape your body, you move because it feels alive. You don't read because you're stupid, you read because learning is part of your nature. Growth becomes joyful when it's not driven by self-rejection. But to arrive at this understanding, you have to confront the anxiety that fuels self-improvement, the fear of falling behind, the fear of insignificance, and the fear of being unworthy. These are not flaws, they are invitations, signals from the deeper self asking to be acknowledged, not corrected. Watts would urge us to stop pathologizing the human condition. You're not broken because you feel pain or doubt. You're alive. The struggle arises when you build an identity around escaping that aliveness. So ask yourself, who are you trying to become? And why do you believe you aren't already enough? Is your vision for the future a true calling or a socially conditioned fear of being unlovable, unworthy, unseen? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary if you want to stop the treadmill and step into the actual experience of being here now. There's a reason Watts loved the metaphor of the dance. Life is not a journey with a destination. It's not a staircase where every step has to be justified by the one above it. It's a dance, a song, a wave, and no one dances to reach the final step. You dance because dancing is the point. But when you treat life like a self-upgrade mission, you miss the music. You're always 2 steps ahead or 1 step behind, never fully moving with the rhythm. And isn't that how most of us feel? Like we're almost living but not quite. You don't need another technique. You need to question the need for technique. You don't need another morning routine. You need to realize you're allowed to wake up slowly. You don't need to optimize your soul. You need to remember that the soul is not a system. It's a mystery, a force, a flame. Alan Watts would laugh at how serious we've become about fixing ourselves. He'd probably say, "You're like a cat trying to catch its own tail." The chase creates the illusion that there's something to be caught. But what if the power was never in the chase? What if the very act of letting go of that pursuit just for a moment is what opens the door to real peace? We think we're being responsible when we obsess over productivity and improvement. But often, we're just dressing up fear in the robes of discipline. The world doesn't need more hyper-optimized people. It needs more people who are present, more people who laugh easily, love freely, and aren't always trying to be someone. So, if you want to improve something, start by letting go of the story that you need to. You may find that the moment you stop trying to become anything, you start becoming everything you already are. The final illusion, why you were never separate from the universe to begin with, so much of our struggle comes down to this single illusion, the belief that we are separate. Separate from others, separate from nature, separate from the universe itself. It feels like we are lone islands, cast adrift in a sea of chaos, trying desperately to build meaning from scraps. But Alan Watts spent his life waking people up from this illusion. He said, again and again, "You are not in the universe, you are the universe, temporarily pretending to be a person." Let that sink in. You're not a lonely observer watching the cosmos unfold like some foreign movie. You're the whole show. You're what the Big Bang has become. You're stardust dancing in human form, woven into the very fabric of everything. The trees, the rivers, the stars, your thoughts, your fears, the sound of your breath, they're not things you experience. They're what you are. So how did we forget this? We've built entire societies around the assumption of separation. We give names to everything, define boundaries, categories, identities. And those distinctions serve a purpose. They help us navigate the world. But the tragedy is when we confuse the map for the territory. Language divides the world into subjects and objects, into me and you, into this and that. And slowly, we start to believe those separations are real. We forget that under every label is the same field of aliveness. That behind your name, your job, your face, is the same essence that animates the stars. And here's the ultimate paradox Watts loved to point out. The moment you try to become one with the universe, you reinforce the idea that you're not. You can't chase unity. You can only remember it. You can only fall back into it. You can only see through the illusion of separation and then laugh, because you realize it was never real to begin with. You were never alone. You were never broken. You were never outside the flow. You're not just part of nature, you are nature. Every heartbeat, every breath, every thought rising and dissolving in your mind, it's all the universe expressing itself in your form. So when you let go of the belief that you're apart from it all, something miraculous happens. You stop trying to get back to anything, because there is no back. There's only this, only now, only presence. Watts would often say, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. You can't find the true self by chasing it, because you are it. You've been it all along. The struggle was never necessary. It was just a dream. And once you awaken from that dream, even for a moment, everything changes. You begin to walk through life not as a person trying to conquer the world, but as the world playing the role of a person. You see beauty in the ordinary, because everything becomes sacred when you stop trying to separate yourself from it. You stop needing to prove anything, because there's nothing outside of you to prove it to. You live, not as an ego demanding control, but as awareness flowing with the dance. So the final illusion isn't death. It isn't fear. It isn't failure. The final illusion is separateness. And the great secret is that it was never true. You've always been home. You've always been connected. You've always been enough. All you had to do was stop struggling and listen. Because as Alan Watts reminds us, you are something the whole universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is something the whole ocean is doing. So breathe. And remember, you never left.